Hello, namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. The US election has taken a dramatic turn. There's turmoil in the Biden camp. The Democrats want him to stand down. The voters are losing faith in him, but Biden is determined to run, and his party is hoping to be saved by Michelle Obama. One poll says that she has a better chance of beating Donald Trump today. So will she replace Joe Biden? We'll discuss that. In India, Coup is shutting down. It was India's challenger to Twitter. It tanked, and this is not just a business story. It shows how India fails to see such platforms as strategic assets. In the UK, hours to go for the election. In a last-ditch attempt, Rishi Sunak has pulled in Boris Johnson to boost his campaign. In Nepal, Prime Minister Prachand is facing his fifth no-confidence vote in 18 months. And finally, why couples are turning to tech tools to optimize their love lives. We'll discuss all of that and more. The headlines first. Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif meets Russian President Putin. The two leaders talked about expansion of bilateral trade. This meeting took place ahead of the SCO summit in Kazakhstan. SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, is a regional bloc that also includes India, but Prime Minister Modi is not attending the summit this year. Japan introduces new currency notes for the first time in 20 years. The new yen comes with 3D hologram technology. It is to prevent counterfeit notes. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has called this a historic move. Tensions flare up again in the Taiwan Strait. This is after China seizes a Taiwanese fishing boat with 5 crew members on board. Beijing says the vessel was illegally fishing in its waters. Taipei has asked China to free the boat and its crew immediately. The World Bank upgrades Russia to a high-income country. Factors like military activity and trade contribute to the shift. This comes as Moscow's wartime economy continues to defy Western sanctions. In 2023, Russia's GDP grew by 3.6%. And 16 killed as heavy rains trigger floods and landslides in northeast India. 300,000 people remain displaced from their homes. Floodwaters inundate Assam's Kaziranga National Park. 11 animals drown as forest officials scramble to rescue the rest. We begin tonight with the US election. It is witnessing a momentous shift. There's turmoil in the Democratic Party. Their candidate Joe Biden is facing an intense pushback. Last week's debate fiasco may end his presidential bid. There are now public calls for Joe Biden to step aside. Members of his own party are building pressure. Democratic lawmakers are breaking ranks like Lloyd Doggett. He's a sitting lawmaker from Texas, and he wants Joe Biden to withdraw from the race. He's the first Democrat to issue a statement to publicly demand Biden's withdrawal. And this is significant because so far the dissent was behind closed doors. Lawmakers were speaking in hushed tones and off the record. But now they're sharing their concerns in public. Sometimes that's all it takes. One lawmaker breaks ranks and the floodgates open. So Biden is trying to contain the damage and to keep his flock together. He's on a crisis mission of sorts to save his nomination as the party's candidate and to prevent this dissent from becoming a mass movement. Once again, he has defended his disastrous debate performance. Joe Biden is now blaming his hectic travel schedule. You see, before the debate with Donald Trump, Biden had traveled to Europe, to France and Italy for official engagements, and now he says he hadn't rested enough before the debate. He says, and I'm quoting, he nearly fell asleep on the stage. That's what he's been quoted as saying. But right after that, Joe Biden committed yet another gaffe. Take a look at this.
More people die from extreme heat than floods, hurricanes, and tornadoes combined. Say that again, combined. More people die from heat than those 3 other major issues.
Was Biden feeling sleepy again? His teleprompter had an instruction to repeat the last sentence, perhaps for emphasis. Say that again. But instead of repeating the sentence, he read out the instruction. Now, it's hard to defend these mistakes, and the White House is having a tough time. Biden's press secretary tried to defend him yesterday.
I want to say we understand the concerns. We get it. The president did not have a great night, as you all know, and many of you reached out during the debate. The president had a cold. He had a hoarse voice. You all heard it. That's why you reached out. But I will say this, and the president said this over the past couple of days, certainly right after the debate. He knows how to do the job.
Biden, too, is trying to hammer the same message. Today, he's meeting Democratic governors. He's expected to address his health concerns. Later this week, Biden will travel to the swing states, the ones which are neither red nor blue. These states have undecided voters, and the candidate they choose usually wins the election. Now, Biden is expected to campaign hard here in these swing states. He'll also sit down for a television interview. Next week, the U.S. is hosting the NATO summit, and Joe Biden will address a press conference at that event. So basically, the US president has a hectic schedule ahead, and you don't need a pundit to decode this. The president wants to show that he is healthy enough, he's fit enough to campaign hard. But it may be too late for this messaging, and I'll tell you why. The Democrats had ordered a poll to test Biden's favorability, to understand how the voters view him, especially after last week's debate, and the results of that poll have leaked. That's more bad news for Joe Biden, because the Democratic poll shows that Biden is losing in key states like New Mexico, Virginia, and New Hampshire. He was earlier ahead of Donald Trump in these states, but now Donald Trump is tipped to win there. What explains this shift? Voters feel that Biden is not physically fit for another term. In fact, let me quote from that same leaked poll report. Underpinning the decline is an increase in already high concerns about the president's age and a growing split among Democrats about what should happen with his candidacy. And that's not all. The same poll found that a different candidate may have a better chance. Someone other than Joe Biden may have a better shot at beating Donald Trump. And there are a few names being tossed around, like Vice President Kamala Harris, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, California Governor Gavin Newsom, and Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitman. All these names are polling better than Joe Biden, but at this point, no one is challenging him, at least not on the record. In fact, Kamala Harris is defending President Biden.
Joe Biden is our nominee. We beat Trump once, and we're going to beat him again, period. I am proud to be Joe Biden's running mate. Thank you.
The election is slated for November. Switching horses this close to the race won't be an easy call. It could completely derail the Democrats. It might split the party. So if the Democrats decide to switch, they'll have to find a compelling name, someone who can excite their voter base enough and consolidate their votes, someone whom the entire party can rally behind. Can Michelle Obama do the job? That's our next story. So the Democrats are bleeding, and as always, they're reaching out for their favorite Band-Aid, Michelle Obama, the former First Lady of the United States. Consider this latest poll. It looks at a hypothetical contest between Michelle Obama and Donald Trump, if they were to contest the presidential election. Michelle Obama and Donald Trump. And who wins the battle? According to this poll, Michelle Obama, 50% respondents say that they would vote for her, 39% say that they would vote for Donald Trump. So that's a decisive win. More importantly, according to this poll, she's the only Democrat who can win against Trump, which tells you a lot about her popularity. And it's not the first time that her name has come up in the presidential race. For Democrats, she's almost like a messiah. Anything goes wrong, and she has to be summoned to save the party. But is this mere manifesting, or is there more to it this time? Let's look at her profile first. America first heard of Michelle Obama in the year 2008. Her husband, Barack Obama, was campaigning for president. She was seen on the campaign trail. The crowds loved her. They rooted for the couple. And when Obama won, the popularity only grew. Michelle entered the White House. She took up the role of the First Lady, and she shook things up. Now, the role of a U.S. First Lady can be restricting. You shape your work to suit the demands of your husband. Michelle Obama did support her husband, but she also held her own. She launched campaigns, she advocated for military families, she promoted healthy eating, she kept it real, and that's why Americans loved her.
Be afraid. You hear me? Young people, don't be afraid. Be focused. Be determined. Be hopeful. Be empowered. Empower yourselves with a good education. Then get out there and use that education to build a country worthy of your boundless promise. Lead by example with hope, never fear.
Who doesn't like advice like that? And it shows in the ratings. Michelle Obama is one of the most highly rated US First Ladies in history. 8 years of her life were spent in the White House, but then came a new horizon. The Obama presidency ended, and that's when Michelle Obama really flourished. She was always popular, but now she could leave behind her First Lady role and just be herself. So she wrote books, gave speeches, signed a Netflix deal, hosted a podcast, motivated Americans to vote. Michelle Obama did all of it and made it look like a breeze. She was eloquent and empathetic. She never lost her cool, and the crowds loved that. Compare that to America's mercurial politicians. She seemed like a blessing. Plus, her modest roots and her journey to success added to the charm.
But what we're looking at today, a portrait of a biracial kid with an unusual name and the daughter of a water pump operator and a stay-at-home mom. What we are seeing is a reminder that there's a place for everyone in this country. Because as Barack said, the two of us can end up on the walls of the most famous address in the world.
In 2020, Gallup named her as the most admired woman. She has a favorability rating of 60%, which is all great. But is it enough to be the president? It depends on who you ask. Part of Michelle Obama's charm is the issues that she advocates for. I mean, look at them. Healthy eating, supporting veterans and their families, voting. What's not to like about them? None of it is controversial. But she's never spoken about complex or divisive issues, not spoken about them enough. For example, the Gaza conflict, no word from her on that. Political neutrality is part of her brand. She chooses issues that serve her cause or the causes that she takes up. Secondly, she has never held a public office. She hasn't formulated policy. She doesn't have a voting record. So you don't know how much she will hold up in the real political world. And to be fair to her, Donald Trump did not have any of it in 2016 either, and yet he managed to beat Hillary Clinton. So I guess the bigger question here is, does Michelle Obama even want to run for president? And the answer is a big no. She has said it multiple times. She does not seek an office. She does not want to run. She does not want to be in the White House again. That's what she's been saying. But the Democrats aren't giving up hope. Will their daydreaming get them anywhere? We're not too sure about that. Now let's talk Indian startups. The funding winter has taken another victim, an app called Coup. It was supposed to be India's answer to Twitter or X, but today the app is shutting down. Coup has run out of cash. The money has dried up. In a last-ditch attempt, the founders tried to sell the company. After going back and forth for months, the buyout talks collapsed. So Coup is shutting down. It had launched in 2020. On first impressions, it seemed like a great idea, an Indian social media platform to cater to Indian users. The app appeared to have the right ingredients too. It supported more than 10 Indian languages, something that many mainstream platforms have failed to offer. So prominent investors were on board. Since launch, Coup had close to 60 million downloads. High-profile influencers were on it, which included a range of celebrities and even union ministers. Now, 4 years ago, the government of India had a spat with X. Back then, the app was called Twitter. India had a spat, the government of India had a spat with Twitter. There was a row over a post. It was shared by a spokesperson of the BJP, which is India's ruling party. Twitter or X had labeled it as manipulated media. So there was a standoff. And Coup was just at the right time, at the right place. Almost overnight, multiple government accounts and ministers migrated to it. The app started getting traction. It expanded internationally. It entered more markets like Brazil and Nigeria, but the app was not making money. And that spelled its end. The founders say they tried to rescue the company. They approached large players in the industry, internet companies and media houses, but none of the conversations materialized. And the founders say, and I'm quoting, many parties did not want to to deal with user-generated content and the wild nature of a social media company. They did not want to deal with this. And this statement is telling. Here was a player that wanted to break the stranglehold of Western apps on the Indian internet. Just look at the landscape. Look at the top apps being used by Indians today. Facebook sits right at the top. It has more than 50% of market share. Instagram comes second, which is another Meta-owned platform. It controls 36% of the market. The rest is controlled by other platforms. Now let's look at the messaging apps. Most Indians are on WhatsApp. India is the biggest market for WhatsApp. It has more than 500 million users. That's almost 40% of the Indian population. This is true for most of these apps. They count India as one of their biggest markets. So there is a growing market, but there is no Indian app to challenge these dominant foreign players in India, and you cannot blame the users for that. In a free market, you need a compelling product to survive and thrive. India hasn't been able to come up with such an alternative. And it's a serious weakness. It hurts Indian interests because such platforms are not just businesses, they also have a strategic role to play. We live in the information age, and these apps are the gatekeepers of information. They control the flow of information. They shape public opinion. They influence political outcomes. I'll give you an example. The Arab Spring of 2011, the movement was born and shaped on social media, on platforms like Facebook and X. It led to the fall of many regimes, dictatorial regimes in this case, but we are not talking about the merits of the outcomes. We are talking about the tools that enable them. These apps are very powerful tools. They can influence minds. Another example is the 2016 US presidential election. Social media platforms were weaponized. They were used to swing votes away from Hillary Clinton and towards Donald Trump. These apps also drive economies. They create jobs and economic opportunities that go beyond geographic borders. Today, just a clutch of companies from the Silicon Valley dominate this space worldwide. That's too much power in the hands of a few. So there are reasons, good reasons for India to invest in this space. It should build an ecosystem to facilitate the growth of such companies, create the conditions where investors do not hesitate, where they make bold bets to help platforms like Coup. And India has the right talent for this. Take the case of UPI, the Unified Payments Interface Platform. It is the backbone of India's digital payments infrastructure. UPI has disrupted digital payments in India. It has made transactions almost free. And now it is going global. UPI is now available in countries like Singapore, France, and the UAE. It has the potential to revolutionize cross-border transactions. Today, most of them go through a bank and customers have to pay extra charges. UPI could disrupt this space for the better. If India can do it in fintech, it should be able to do it in the content space, in technology, media, social media. It is time to make more success stories. It is time to see these entrepreneurs as strategic assets, to invest in them and not let them fail. Staying with India and the tragedy in Hathras, it's a district in the state of Uttar Pradesh. Yesterday, there was a religious function there. 250,000 people showed up, but the venue could accommodate only 80,000. The situation got out of hand. There was a stampede. More than 100 devotees were crushed to death. The gathering was organized by a local preacher, a man called Narayan Sakar Hari. Before he became a godman, he served as a cop in the local police for nearly 2 decades. He's now being blamed for the stampede. Police have submitted a preliminary investigation report. It says that the devotees were rushed. The devotees rushed towards this man for his blessings. His security pushed and shoved them away, and that caused the stampede. The godman is now missing. The entire episode is distressing and tragic, and unfortunately not a first. It exposes many pressing issues in India, like the safety of devotees. Anyone who's visited a major place of worship in the country would tell you that unregulated crowds are common. And these so-called men of God exploit the faith and misery of the poor, while the administration looks the other way. Our next report has more.
It is a disaster which could have been avoided. The space where these devotees had assembled wasn't small. Permissions were in place to host up to 80,000 people. but the event went out of control. More than 250,000 devotees showed up. That's 3 times more than capacity. The state government has ordered a judicial probe. The investigators will encounter some familiar issues. Issues which most devotees in India deal with when they visit a place of worship. Overcrowding is a common feature at such venues. In the recent past, it has led to many mishaps, like what happened in 2022 in Kashmir on New Year's Day. Thousands of Hindus had gathered at a famous shrine. The crowd was too large. There was a crush and 12 people died. Something similar has happened at Hathras. The organizers say they spent more than 2 weeks preparing for the event. But early inquiries have revealed some clear gaps in the arrangements. The event happened inside a giant tent. Reports say there were not enough exits, and the crowds had blocked the existing ones, making it difficult for people to leave. The families of the victims say there was no crowd management and no medical staff on standby. To make matters worse, the ground was muddy due to rains. Many people lost their balance, they slipped and fell, only to be crushed by the crowd. This incident fits into a pattern of mishaps. Religious gatherings in India are quite prone to such incidents. A few years back, some researchers looked into this, and what they found was shocking. 79% of all stampedes in India happen at places of worship. Broadly, there are 2 factors to blame: the lack of crowd control and lapses by organizers in planning and coordination. Such incidents have taken thousands of lives in the past. Between 2001 and 2014, India witnessed over 3,000 stampedes. Most of them happened at religious events, and they have killed more than 2,400 people. Clearly, India needs more robust measures to protect devotees at places of worship. Demands are being made for better safeguards. India's Supreme Court has received a petition. It calls for an inquiry into the Hathras stampede. The petition wants an expert committee to be set up under the supervision of a retired judge. It also calls for the framing of guidelines and safety measures for public gatherings. This is a cause that everyone should champion.
Now let's look at what's happening in the UK. There are just hours to go for the British general election, and the candidates are holding their last campaigns. They're doing their best to get those final undecided voters. And as for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, he's doing his best to soften the blow that's expected to come. For months now, opinion polls have been saying that Sunak is on his way out. He leads the Conservative Party or the Tories. They have been in power for 14 years. And the British public seems to have had enough. Opinion polls have on average put the Tories 20 points behind their biggest rivals. That's the Labour Party. Now the Labour Party's lead has shrunk in recent weeks, but they're still miles ahead of the Tories. They were a full 17 points up last week. That should translate into a landslide for Keir Starmer, the Labour Party leader. So unless a miracle takes place, Rishi Sunak will most likely be leaving 10 Downing Street. But of course, it's never over till the final whistle. And while in search of a miracle, Sunak decided to ask an old Tory stalwart for help.
How grateful I am to all of you for everything that you've been doing over the last few weeks, and for coming so late tonight to this venue, way past Keir Starmer's bedtime. If you are slightly surprised to see me, I want to be absolutely clear that I was glad when Rishi asked me to help. Of course, I couldn't say no.
Sunak rang up his old boss Boris Johnson, who stepped in to try and charge up the Tory supporters. Now, Johnson is the UK's former Prime Minister. He's a controversial figure, and that's putting it mildly. He's now infamous for Partygate. Boris Johnson hosted parties at 10 Downing Street, and he did so during COVID lockdowns. He violated the strict social distancing laws that his own government had put in place. Ordinary people could not go out and meet their dying relatives, but Boris and the gang were partying in the Prime Minister's office. So you can imagine the public's anger when word of these parties got out. And pictures. Boris Johnson was removed from office in disgrace. Sunak was his chancellor then, like his finance minister. He was among those who helped oust Boris. He was accused of betraying the Prime Minister, and now he's called him up asking for help because Boris Johnson still remains popular in certain Tory circles.
Isn't it great to have our Conservative family united, my friends?
Yeah! Will this belated reconciliation between Boris and Sunak help turn the tide? Probably not. But that did not stop Boris Johnson from giving it his best shot.
5 years ago, you helped to send Jeremy Corbyn and his then disciple, Keir Starmer, into orbit where they belonged, and we got Brexit done. We restored. Labour are so cocky that they're so complacent, they're so smug, they're barely concealing their agenda anymore, and we can see what it is.
Boris Johnson launched an attack on the Labour Party's agenda. The Conservatives claim that Labour are planning to raise taxes and not do anything about a burning issue in the UK, which is illegal immigration. The Conservatives are sticking to their main plan, that is sending people to Rwanda. Rishi Sunak says that if he's back in 10 Downing Street on Friday, he will do everything possible to start the Rwanda flights. Labour will not be doing this. They will take a different approach. Their leader, Keir Starmer, has not exactly spelled out his plan, but he may not feel the need to do so. After all, he seems to be cruising towards victory. So let's look at another question. What would Keir Starmer's victory mean for India? Historically, the Labour Party used to be the preferred choice for Indian origin people in the UK, and therefore it had good ties with the government of India, but this changed under Starmer's predecessor. That was Jeremy Corbyn. Corbyn had a controversial take on the issue of Kashmir, and he was perceived to be against India's democratically elected government. So if Jeremy Corbyn was to win an election, Anglo-Indian ties would have suffered. But Keir Starmer is not Jeremy Corbyn. He has tried to rebuild Labour's relationship with the Indian community. He is also fielding a number of Indian origin candidates during this election. In fact, every British political party is doing this. They all know how important British Indian votes are. One candidate even brought a dash of Bollywood to their campaign. Shilpa Shetty is campaigning in Leicester East. It just shows how influential Indians can be in the UK. And Labour knows this too. It says it will focus on issues important to British Indians. Keir Starmer could also revive ties with the Indian government if he comes to power. And that is good news for cooperation between New Delhi and London. He may not be as overtly pro-India as Rishi Sunak, but Keir Starmer understands the importance of good relations with the world's fifth largest economy. So irrespective of who comes to power, the India-UK relationship should stay intact. Our next story is about Nepal, where political parties seem to have taken the phrase burning the midnight oil a bit too seriously. Nepal has three major political parties. Late on Tuesday night, two of them struck a deal, the Nepali Congress and the Communist Party of Nepal. And what's the deal about? It's a power-sharing pact. The two parties want to oust Prime Minister. The Prime Minister, his name is Pushback, also known as Prachand. He belongs to the third major party, the Communist Maoist Centre. Now his rivals, the other two parties, want him out. But can they really pull it off? It's basically a numbers game. And right now, the opposition, these rivals, have the numbers. You need 138 seats for majority in the Nepalese parliament. The Nepali Congress has 89 seats. The Communist Party has 78. Together, that's 167 seats, so way more than 138, which is why the two sides are fairly confident. They've asked the Prime Minister to step down, but Prachand remains defiant. He says he would much rather face a vote of confidence, meaning there should be a vote in Parliament. If the opposition has more numbers, the Prime Minister loses the vote. Now, Prachand has faced and survived four such votes of confidence in the last 18 months. And all of this indicates political turmoil. But that's all that Nepal has known since 2008. Until the year 2005, the Himalayan nation was a constitutional monarchy. But the last King Gyanendra went rogue. He dismissed the parliament and he claimed absolute power. It led to protests across the country. People took to the streets demanding the abdication of the king. So in 2006, he finally gave in. Gyanendra transferred powers to the parliament. Soon the monarchy was abolished in Nepal, and in 2008, the country became a democracy. Usually that's a good thing for a country. But for Nepal, it was a disaster. In the last 16 years, Nepal has seen 13 governments. Imagine that, 13 governments in 16 years. That's like having a different government almost every year, but with more or less the same players and the same chaos. Parties changed sides, coalitions broke down, prime ministers changed. It's like political musical chairs, and it seems never ending. I'll give you an example. In 2022, general elections were held in Nepal. Prachand wanted to become prime minister. His ally was the Nepali Congress party. They did not agree to his prime ministership, so Prachand switched sides. He went to the Communist Party. That's the faction of former Prime Minister Palki Sharma Oli. But even that arrangement lasted only for a few months. In March 2023, Prachand dumped Oli. He went back to the old friend, the Nepali Congress. Then this year, in 2024, Prachand changed his mind again. He dumped the Nepali Congress and joined hands with Palki Sharma Oli once again. So much for having trust issues. And now it seems that both alliance partners have had enough. They're tired of this back and forth. So the Nepali Congress and the Communist Party have joined hands and decided to dump Prachand altogether. I know it's confusing. If you fail to understand this, do not blame yourself. Bollywood movies have simpler plots and lesser drama than this. And it's not just complicated and confusing. 13 governments in 16 years also means instability. It means damage to Nepal's economy. In 2023, Nepal's GDP grew by just 1.9%. Inflation was around 8%. Unemployment stood at 11%. Investors do not want to come to Nepal. The youth are leaving the country. Last year, around 400,000 Nepalese left the country. They have a population of around 30 million. So that's a huge chunk of people leaving. And it's mainly because of jobs. But what options do they have? Their politicians are busy shifting loyalties. In April this year, some citizens were fed up of this, so they took to the streets. Do you know what their demand was? They wanted the monarchy back in Nepal. It shows how deep the political crisis is. It's an unfortunate and dangerous trend because putting a person back on the throne will not solve Nepal's problems. Monarchy is never the answer. But to save their democracy, Nepal must stop their politicians from playing a game of thrones. Our next story is from Singapore. It's about a player from their national football team. His name is Hassan Sunny. He's Singapore's goalkeeper, and he has become a sporting sensation in China. Last month, Hassan's heroics helped Singapore during a match, and that inadvertently helped China. It propelled the Chinese team to the next stage of the FIFA Football World Cup. It happened all thanks to Singapore's Hassan. And since then, Chinese football fans have been trying to show their appreciation. They've been sending Hassan money, so much money, that he's asking them to stop now and donating some of it. It's a fascinating tale of how sport unites people across borders. Our next report has more.
This is Hassan Sunny. He plays football for the Singaporean national team. The 40-year-old is Singapore's goalkeeper. Now, Singapore isn't some footballing powerhouse. The tiny island nation of about 6 million people is always a scrappy underdog. They were in this familiar position last month as well, when they took on Thailand in the 2026 FIFA World Cup qualifiers. These were the Asian qualifiers. Singapore were drawn in a group with Thailand, South Korea and China. So not much was expected from the underdogs. But some Chinese football fans prayed for Singapore's success against Thailand, so that China could reap the benefits. Thailand were looking for a spot in the next stage of the tournament. They had to beat Singapore by 3 goals to leapfrog China. This means that China's destiny was out of its hands, and they needed a miracle. That miracle was provided by Hassan Sani. Hassan made 11 saves against Thailand on the 11th of June. He denied Thailand their coveted 3-goal victory margin, which means Hassan's heroics sent China through to the next stage. And the Chinese football fans went wild. They were extremely grateful to their Singaporean savior, and they wanted to show it. They found out that Hassan's family has a food stall in Singapore. It's called Dapur Hassan. It's run by his wife and other members of the family. So what did the Chinese football fans do? They flocked to the stall to show their appreciation. Dapur Hassan became a sensation overnight. It was packed with Chinese visitors. So much so that the food started getting sold out mere hours after the stall opened. And then the Chinese fans went a step further. They started sending money to the stall via the shop's QR payment code. And we aren't just talking about Chinese customers. People from across China sent Dapur Hassan money, often in denominations of 8, which is a lucky number in China and conveys wishes of prosperity. This heartfelt gesture by the Chinese football fans was appreciated, of course, but Hassan was also worried. He didn't know what the tax implications would be if he kept getting so much money from China. And he also heard that some scammers were taking advantage, circulating fake QR codes to get money from Hassan's well-wishers. So the Singaporean goalkeeper made this plea in Chinese. He asked the fans to stop sending him money, but he said that he was extremely grateful for their support. Then came the next step. Hassan said he realized that the money he received wasn't his. He said it was a donation and he wanted to pass it along. So yesterday, Hassan donated 10,000 Singaporean dollars to a welfare home, a place that provides residential shelter for young boys. Hassan says he felt strongly about the issue because he wasn't from a well-to-do family, and he wanted to do something to improve the lives of children. So that's the latest chapter in the tale of Singapore's sensational soccer star. Hopefully, it acts as an inspiration across the world.
Now let's look at Africa, at Kenya in the east. The country is still seeing protests. They've become a regular occurrence, scheduled for every Tuesday and Thursday. They began 2 weeks ago. People were protesting against new taxes in Kenya. The Kenyan government had proposed them in the annual finance bill, which is their annual budget. But many in Kenya were against the tax hike, so they took to the streets. These protests were led by young people and they were mostly peaceful. The protesters just wanted to put pressure on the government, and it worked. Kenya's President William Ruto withdrew his finance bill. The people got what they wanted, but it came at a high price. The Kenyan police have been clashing with the demonstrators, and more than 39 protesters have died as a result. This has led to widespread anger, which was visible during yesterday's protests too. Those were empty coffins. Protesters in the capital, Nairobi, placed them on the roads. It symbolizes their anger against police brutality. But it seems that the police do not care, because they clashed with the protesters again yesterday. Take a look at this. It looks like a war zone. The police are firing tear gas, rubber bullets, and sometimes even live ones. And Kenya's President William Ruto tried to justify this.
I have kids like they do, and I care when there are issues in town where criminals can take advantage of situations and create a situation where the police have to use rubber bullets, the police have to use live bullets in some cases, because that is what an independent police service has to do.
Ruto said that criminals were taking advantage of the peaceful protests. Looters are mixing with the crowd and wreaking havoc. He's not wrong about this. Yesterday, some people in plain clothes were seen carrying weapons. And this is Kenya, not the US. Openly carrying firearms is not common in Nairobi. Some business owners in the Kenyan capital shuttered their shops yesterday. Some of them set up patrols. They carried wooden clubs to scare away the looters.
I sell clothes and shoes. I can't accept you to send me back home. Now it is a must that I defend myself and my business, and that is why I am carrying this baton, and I will do anything to protect my business.
So some bad faith actors have infiltrated the demonstrations. The once peaceful protests are turning increasingly violent. It is causing the organizers to rethink their strategy. Critics believe that the bad actors have been planted by the Kenyan government to give the police an excuse to crack down on the protests. But they don't have concrete proof of it yet. So some organizers want to delay the next demonstration. Remember, the protests are scheduled for every Tuesday and Thursday. So the next one should take place tomorrow, but instead, some protesters want to reassess the situation. After all, the protests have transformed over the weeks. They began with a call to reject this year's finance bill, which has been successful. The new demonstrations do not seem to have an end goal. Many are calling for President Ruto to resign, but he has not shown any signs of doing so. Kenya's next presidential election will take place only in 2027. If the protesters want him out, perhaps they should do so via the ballot. If not, they may have a long battle ahead. Our next story comes from the Caribbean, where Beryl, a deadly hurricane, is devastating one island nation after another. The storm began on Monday, and so far it has killed at least 7 people, rendered thousands homeless, and broken records. Beryl is the earliest ever Category 5 hurricane in the Atlantic Ocean. What makes it so powerful? And is respite in sight? Here's a report.
This is Beryl, a deadly hurricane that's dousing the Caribbean. It has carved a path of destruction. At least 7 people are dead, thousands are homeless. Infrastructure has been destroyed, roads are nearly invisible, and trees have been snapped in half. Look at these before and after satellite images. This is the scale of devastation. The hurricane first made landfall in Grenada on Monday. It's a small island country in the Caribbean. Experts say it was flattened in about half an hour. At the time, Beryl was a Category 4 hurricane and it caused extreme damage.
To see this level of destruction, it is almost Armageddon-like, almost total damage or destruction of all buildings, whether they be public buildings, homes, or other private facilities. Complete and total destruction of the natural environment. The entire communication system is completely destroyed.
But this wasn't the worst of it. Since Monday, the storm has been roaring through the Caribbean islands, and it's only getting stronger. This has stunned experts because Beryl is breaking records. A storm as strong as Beryl has never been recorded in the Atlantic Ocean in June. A day later, it made another record. It became the earliest ever Category 5 hurricane. Now the storm is moving towards Jamaica and is expected to bring a barrage of problems, and people are worried.
Yeah, right now we're worrying about the storm here because we don't know it's Category 5 and Jamaica. People are worried every ways. People are concerned about the storm, of course.
The hurricane could weaken gradually, but it could still inflict significant damage before that. It will pass over Jamaica and then unload deadly storm conditions across the Cayman Islands. But what's behind this life-threatening hurricane? Why is it so devastating? Because of climate change. The storm is powered by above-average sea temperatures. As the oceans are warming, hurricanes are getting worse. And this is only the beginning of hurricane season in the North Atlantic. The experts say the worst may be yet to come.
Hurricane Beryl is the earliest Category 5 hurricane on record. It highlights the growing impact of climate change on global weather patterns, particularly on small island developing states like Jamaica. While our carbon emissions are minuscule, our region bears the brunt of the impacts of climate change.
Others are echoing the sentiment, like the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, an island country in the Eastern Caribbean.
Union Island has been devastated. The reports that I have received indicate that 90% of the houses have been severely damaged or destroyed. Their roofs, structures. The Union Island Airport's roof is gone. It's no more.
Now the Prime Minister is calling out rich countries for their climate failures and urging them to take action. And he's not wrong. Climate change could force many to pay the dues of others, as the unprecedented no longer remains the unexpected.
Our last story tonight is about office romance. No, it is not about finding love in the office, it's about finding the office in your love. Sounds like Gen Z mumbo jumbo, and maybe it is. But this trend is all the rage. It refers to optimizing your love life to make it run more smoothly. How do you do that? By using business management softwares to organize relationships. Believe me, this is not a dystopian future. It is already happening. Mostly thanks to tech-savvy youngsters. They grew up with technology, so it comes naturally to them. Plus, using digital tools like apps or softwares is part of our culture now. For years, we've used them to optimize our work, but can they optimize relationships too? An increasing number of people believe they can, and they have all kinds of tools at their disposal, from Slack, which is a management tool, to Excel and Google Sheets, also softwares like Trello, which help you make to-do lists. All of these are used across businesses. Now they're being used in the business of love to create shared digital to-do lists and grocery lists, meal planning, dividing childcare responsibilities, and even scheduling huddle sessions. So you may no longer hear the traumatizing "we need to talk." Instead, you'll just get a calendar invite. But does it help? Well, the jury is still out. Those who use these tools believe that they help, that treating relationships like business is useful because they have a clear strategy to tackle chores. Couples can share the load, mental and otherwise, and this is important. 25% of divorced couples see disagreements over housework as the main reason for their breakup. 25%. So when you automate and streamline it, it apparently leaves more room for spontaneity and fun, which is a clear upside, but not everyone is enamored. The critics say that this process can be alienating because jargon seeps into the relationship, which is a common side effect of this trend. Corporate speak is turning into a love language. Finding intimacy is now called developing a robust relational code. Casual dating means looking for, and I'm quoting, a diversified portfolio, believe it or not. Couples want to table discussions about dinner and do a deep dive on picking wallpapers and choose the low-hanging fruit during movie nights. Consider this new viral term, emotional bank account. Emotional bank account, it is a metaphor for investing in your relationship the same way as you would invest in a bank account. Instead of money, there are interactions. You deposit and withdraw positive and negative interactions. Positive ones help your bank account grow. Negative comments shrink it. So the idea is that you should have more positive than negative interactions with your partner, which is not rocket science, really. At the same time, business speak is designed for work. Much like the softwares in question, these concepts can make work more efficient, no doubt. But when it comes to relationships, can business jargon really tackle messy emotions? Because businesses were not built to deal with emotions. Would you not need a human language and a more humane approach for love? I guess there's no perfect answer to these questions. Experts have always said that there are different love languages, There are words of affirmation, quality time, physical touch, acts of service, giving and receiving gifts. There are different ways to show love and invest in a relationship. If adding corporate jargon and tools to this list helps some couples, then so be it. The critics may call it over-engineering your life, but if it works for you, it works for you. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Belarus marks its Independence Day with a military parade. Residents in Turkey celebrate their team's advance to the Euro quarterfinals for the first time since 2008. And Paris is all set to welcome athletes to its brand new Olympics village, just 2 weeks before the Games. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1962, France declared that Algeria was independent. This was 2 days after an independence referendum was held in the North African country. It ended 132 years of French colonization. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We will see you tomorrow.
Войск и направляется к центральной трибуне.
Министр обороны генерал-лейтенант Хренин.
В стенах училища получают образование достойные и сильные юноши страны. Готовые улики проходит парадный расчет отряда почетного караула народно-освободителя. Стрижи входят в состав гвардейского центра показа авиационной техники.
Hours of training, immense hard work, physical and mental exhaustion. An athlete has to win a battle every day to be able to wear the golden medal. And when that moment arises, all sacrifices pay off. This is what happened with Biniam Gurme, a 24-year-old Eritrean athlete who has scripted history. He has become the first black African rider to win a stage on the Tour de France. He won stage 3 of the 2024 Tour in Turin. He defeated British cyclist Mark Cavendish. Soon after winning the tournament, Gurme took to social media to say, "Let me open the door. It means a lot personally for me and the continent of Africa," he added. Gurme is the third African to win the Grand Boucle. Before him, South Africans Daryl Impey and Rob Hunter have claimed the title. This win marks the Eritrean cyclist's second Grand Tour stage win. He won his first title with the 2022 Giro d'Italia's sprint race. The Tour was his next goal. However, in his first attempt last year, he found the level to be higher than any other race. The intensity of the Tour de France caught him by surprise.
Yeah, the first thing, it's a different race. It's totally different than in races, even totally different than the Monument, let's say. Also, like Giro d'Italia, it's a Grand Tour, but the atmosphere, also the level of the riders, especially on the sprint stage. It's crazy. Like, yeah, I just knew the sprint stage, it starts from, I don't know, 10K, but in the tour it's already blocked the road 55K, even 60K. So yeah, that makes really hard. Also, I think the best sprinter in the world, they are here on the Tour de France. So that's also make the race harder. Also, the GC guys, they need to be positioned well in the last 10K. So that also make the race harder. So yeah, it's completely different. So like I said, I was totally nervous from the start until the finish tour. So I already spent a lot of energy for nothing. I waste a lot of energy.
Gurmeet's journey to glory has not been easy. He had to leave not only his home, but also the continent to achieve his dream. He had to come to Europe, learn English and the cycling language to achieve his dream.
Yeah, I was really nervous already before the start. You know, if it's the biggest race on the cycling, and to be part of that, it's yeah. I was really nervous and panic almost from the start until the end of the tour. But yeah, I learned quite a lot. I also knew this is totally different race, so you need to prepare well with everything mentally and physically.
Since childhood, Gurmeet was influenced by Slovak cyclist Peter Sagan, and he eventually grew up to follow his model's footsteps. Gurmeet is now eyeing the 2024 Paris Olympics.
I think it would be nice to represent my country on the Olympic Games, to race with the national, because yeah, this is one of the, I would say, one of the opportunity to race with the national team jersey, and yeah, I'm really looking forward for these 2 big months.
The journey could be long, the challenges could be many, but as they say, success comes to those who refuse to give up. Gurmeet's relentless efforts towards his dream is a living example of that.
From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden. How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America.